personal, intimate perspective, and then we'll go to, okay, you're the person that has to make this stuff happen. Good afternoon, Change Now. It's lovely to be here to host our next session on adaptation. We're going to be talking about cities, we're going to be talking about forests, we're going to be talking about the civil engineering that we need to make sure we future-proof cities and all the places where people live and our precious environment. I have a fantastic panel with some of the leading thinkers on adaptation and a brilliant fireside with an amazing environmental activist and communicator. But first off, to kick us off, to get us in the frame of mind, to set us up, to give us context, an amazing polar explorer, a National Geographic adventurer who has traveled the world looking at examples of adaptation, and particularly focusing on local communities and how important it is to preserve local cultures when we talk about what the future might look like. It is my great pleasure to introduce to the stage Victoria Herrmann.
Good afternoon, Change Now. I'm going to start us off with a question. By a show of hands, how many people here have read or heard of a choose-your-own-adventure book? Hands up. All right, we have some readers. For those of you who have not read a choose-your-own-adventure, this type of book puts you, the reader, as the main character of the story. Every few pages, you come to a question that you have to answer. Go explore a cave, turn to page 32, or dive deep into the ocean, turn to page 64. It is your choices as the reader that progresses the story, and ultimately chooses your ending. Today, I want us to play a choose-your-own-adventure, where each of you in the audience is going to choose where this presentation goes. I don't have an ending yet. That is for all of you to decide. So my first question, are you ready to join this choose-your-own-adventure? Yeah. Oh, that was not good enough. Yes. Are you ready? Yes. You are all National Geographic explorers. You're storytellers, you're scientists, you're educators, and National Geographic has brought you all here because they want to know what our world's climate story is. We know that the planet is rapidly changing, but what does that mean to us? How do we share that story with the world? Your first assignment will take you about 4,500 kilometers south to Jordan. National Geographic wants you to fly from Paris to Amman and take about a 2-hour drive south into the Jordanian desert to the town of Wadi Musa, about a 16,000 person community that sits at the edge of Petra, one of our world's 8 modern wonders. As you come into Wadi Musa, you see the sun cascading down the mountains. You see it catch the rosy glints of the buildings, and you are filled with awe and inspiration. Now, you are only here for a short few days, and you need to get to work. So you start exploring the city, and you come across Tahir. Tahir is an archaeologist that works at Petra, just like his father. He is from Wadi Musa, and he is passionate about the history of this ancient Nabatean city. He shows you on his phone what the city looked like in its zenith and what it is today. But pictures can't really tell Petra's story. He wants to take you on a hike through the ancient city to show you its water management and the climate impacts that it's facing today. And just as you are about to go to Petra with Tahir, you come across Haifa, who is a climate scientist and heritage professional. She is about to give a presentation in Wadi Musa's community center about the future of southern Jordan. And so we have our first question. By a show of hands, who wants to go on a hike through Petra with Tahir? All right, I think I already know the answer to this one from the amount of hands. By a show of hands, who wants to go to the community center with Haifa to learn about the climate science of Jordan? All right, that was a few hands, but sadly for those scientists among us, we are following Tahir. Tahir brings us into the ancient city. And in order to get to the center of this Nabatean settlement in the desert, you first have to take a long walk through the wadi, through the caverns. And just as you come on your 30th minute of walking, you start to glimpse the facade that has made Petra famous, the Treasury Building. And just like that, you see it, and it is miraculous. It is inspiring to think that hundreds of years ago, a community created this heritage and a center for trade from all corners of the world. Despite being in the desert, the Nabateans created an awe-inspiring water management system that was able to accommodate over 1,000 camels by capturing rainwater and ingeniously storing it underneath the archaeology we see today. Your day is spent wandering Petra, learning from local leaders on how traditions have been passed down from the Nabateans one generation to the next, from what you see today, from baking to pottery. And this has been an amazing day for you as an explorer, but it's a pretty nice and sunny day in Petra. This is not always the case. Because of climate change, southern Jordan is getting drier, and the extreme rain events are getting more intense. Flash flooding has always been a part of Petra's story, but floods like these have only happened once every few years. Now they happen every few months in the wet season. In this flood in December 2022, Petra got 6 months of rain in half a day. This floods Wadi Musa, endangering human lives, and this eighth wonder of the world. These quick currents pick up rocks and destroy the facade, and endangers the millions of tourists that come to see Petra every year, and the 70% of Wadi Musa that relies on that tourism income. Now, you are feeling pretty devastated about these flash floods and the climate impacts at Jordan. But Tahir does not want us to dwell on floods. He wants to show you a solution. The Petra Management Authority, where he works, is rebuilding the ancient system of holding water. They are using the Nabatean knowledge of how to create dams, of how to store water, and how to slow it down so that it is not destroying Petra and the community that calls it home. You're feeling inspired that this solution is being taken from ancient wisdom, modernized by current technology, and saving this spectacular site. And it's on that inspiration that you say farewell to Tahir. We all get in a very stretched Jeep to fit all 200 of us or so, and we head out to our next location. Now, we are traveling across the world, from Jordan to the Philippines. We arrive in Manila, a bit jet-lagged, and we get into a bus to head to the mountains, about a 10-hour drive from the capital. We end up in Banaue. It is here that we are visiting another World Heritage Site, the Ifugao Rice Terraces, a vibrant series of rice terraces that support Ifugao communities that have cared for this land, for the rice, and for each other for millennia. Now, you want to hear about climate impacts in these rice terraces. And so you quickly check in to your youth hostel in Banaue, and you hear someone talking. It's Marlon, a traditional knowledge leader and a carer of the Save the Ifugao Rice Terraces movement. He's presenting on climate change impacts, and so you listen. You hear about changing monsoon seasons, how that's disrupting the rice cycle and the connection communities have to this green. But Marlon does not want you to just hear. He wants you to do. He wants you to dance. He wants you to taste the rice. He wants you to sing. Because for him, it is not just the tangible heritage of the terraces. It's the intangible traditions that connect communities to their history. So he invites you to a harvest festival that's happening just down the road. And as you are about to leave, you run into Michael, who says, no, it's not about the intangible heritage. It's about touching the rice and moving through the terraces. I want to take you on a walk along our mountains. And so we have our second choice in our Choose Your Own Adventure. Do we dance with Marlon, or do we walk with Michael? By a show of hands, who wants to go with Marlon to the festival, to dance, to sing, to eat some rice for those who are hungry? All right. And by a show of hands, who wants to walk through the terraces? All right, we are walking through the terraces. We say farewell. I danced a little bit because I'm a dancer and I can't help going with Marlon. And we move through the terraces where people are harvesting rice as they have from one generation to the next. They harvest once a year and move with the seasons. You learn how this rice is more than just food security. It is a way of life. It connects youth to elders to the spiritual landscape, to understand how every human is connected to this planet and to one another. But Michael shows you, as you walk along the terraced landscape, the consequences of a changing climate. The Ifugao rice terraces are experiencing a change in their wet season. Similar to Petra, they are experiencing more extreme weather events. The communities and the terraces are resilient, but they were not built for the amount of water that is now experienced in each rainfall. This leads to mudslides like you see here that destroys not just rice, but the terraces itself. These terraces that have been built and rebuilt and maintained for hundreds of years. But like Petra, Michael wants you not to think about the mudslides, but the strength of the community and its use of indigenous knowledge to rebuild, to learn from these changing weather patterns, both from knowledge from one farmer to the next and from downscaled climate models, from taking our global view of what the world will look like in the future and combining that with indigenous knowledge and local weather observations to get a picture of what to prepare for here in the rice terraces. This combination of ancient wisdom and of downscaled climate models is providing a foundation for resilience for Michael, for Marlon, and every community that calls the rice terraces home. You have loved your time in the Philippines, but sadly, it's time for our expedition to come to a close. And so you say goodbye to Marlon and to Michael, and you head home to National Geographic Base Camp to share what you found. And so our final question in our Choose Your Own Adventure: what story will you tell? Will you tell a story of hopelessness, of the consequences of a changing climate and action coming decades too late? Or do you tell a story of hope, that despite these challenges, you are able to see that people are taking action and are safeguarding our spectacular heritage? By a show of hands, hopelessness? Hope? When you look at news about heritage and climate change, this is what you see: heritage in crisis. This story is not the full story, and it is dangerous to tell a story just of hopelessness. When we think we know the ending to the story, and we think that ending is hopeless, we are cognitively more likely to choose inaction and decrease goal-oriented behavior to make a difference. We have to choose stories of hope in order to give us the pathway to choose our own adventure to a climate future that is thriving. We need to change the narrative about losing the things that make us who we are to saving the things that make us who we are. My project, Preserving Legacies, in partnership with National Geographic Society and the International Council of Monuments in Sight, is changing that narrative. We are taking this challenge of climate change being the fastest growing threat to cultural and natural heritage and choosing hope. We are working with 20 communities around the world on a mission to empower every one of them with the technical training and the resources to safeguard their sites. We are working with downscaled climate models, with traditional and indigenous knowledge, and with a global community of practice to connect Marlon and Tahir into a story of hope where they can change the narrative, not just of their community, but of the tens of thousands of heritage sites around the world that need our help. I'm going to close by talking about the Paris Agreement because of the background you see behind me. We think that the Paris Agreement is powered by presidents and policy, but it's not. It's powered by people, from historic preservationists to protesters. Each one of us has a role to play in changing our story, in transforming the future, so that we are giving a future to our past. We are saving the things that make us who we are as humans. So I'm going to ask you to join me in the next choice of our Choose Your Own Adventure by following along with Preserving Legacies' story, by getting involved, by nominating a heritage site or community in your country to join our global movement to save our sites. Thank you.
Victoria, thank you so much. That was a fascinating presentation. Thank you for giving us hope, and thank you also for walking us through the world through the eyes of Tahir and Marlon and Michael, and looking at the photos of all those amazing places and the amazing people that are providing us with a course of action that isn't just sit down and let it happen. It is why we're all here, right? So thank you again, Victoria. Next on stage, our panel to talk about what's happening in their parts of the world and what ideas they have. It's my great pleasure to welcome to the stage the Mayor of Reykjavik, Dagur Eggertsson. Welcome. The Mayor of Copenhagen, the Lord Mayor of Copenhagen, Sophie Hæstorp Andersen. Nice to see you. Xavier Dommange, who runs Coeur et Canopée. And we're going to talk more about exactly what Coeur et Canopée means. And Isabelle Spiegel, who is an amazing engineer, runs Adaptation for VINCI, who a lot of people will know. Welcome to the stage. Thank you, everybody. Grab a seat over there. Now, I tell you what, I'm thirsty, so I'm going to grab myself a little bit of water while I warm us up here and then let you guys do your own. Hopefully we don't spill it all. There we go. So, look, I want to kick off with the view from cities. The work we do in cities affects more people than anywhere else. Dagur, what does adaptation mean to Reykjavik?
Well, when it comes to adaptation to climate change, two things are the kind of biggest on the radar and the agenda. Rising sea levels and extreme weather. Some would say that we have had extreme weather always. Mm-hmm. We have 4 different weathers in a day, so we're kind of used to that. But our sewer systems are not necessarily used to extreme rain, and it's different for different part of the country as well. So I think the task here is to do something about it before it happens, and have it in mind when you're planning, designing, and doing public works. And that's a challenge, but we can learn from others, like Copenhagen, that is one of the cities that have had kind of 100 years incidents a lot of the time in recent years. So this is coming, and I believe in nature-based solutions and trying to use the trip to make the city beautiful as well. And before coming a mayor, I was a physician. So
there is such a huge health element to what we're talking about.
Yes, because if you have a beautiful, attractive city, it makes you move around. It makes you happier. You meet other people. So it's a lot of kind of public health benefit in doing it right as well.
Sophie, Lord Mayor of Copenhagen, obviously Dagur mentioned acting before it happens, but we're already seeing it happen. What does that mean in Copenhagen?
In Copenhagen, it means even more cloud bursts and storms, and it also means that we have to secure the city from the rising sea levels, because what we see is that sometimes after a storm has pushed all the water up in the Baltic Sea, it turns around and comes back even more. And then we get flooding. And then we get flooding in Copenhagen and a lot of our shore lines in Denmark. So already in 2011 and in 2012, the city started adapting to climate change with the first very comprehensive plan for cloudbursts, and next the climate adaptation plan, and then we went on to take on the storm surges with a big plan for how to adapt to not only cloudbursts but also to the rising sea levels. So we've been going around now for a couple of years, I must say, also before my time, but we still have a lot to do. And as we see all over the world, storms and extreme weather is becoming more and more something that we see not only once a year or once 10 a year or once 100 a year. It becomes something we do every year or every month.
So we saw with in Victoria's presentation how Tahir in Jordan was using the ancient knowledge to try and manage these extreme water flows. Just dig down a little bit, pardon the pun, into what are some of the solutions that you've implemented, for example, cloudburst?
When it comes to cloudburst, one of the reasons that I call it a very comprehensive plan is because we are doing private-public. We're working together with private and public companies in order to make this plan work. And every time that we have to think of a new solution, we think recreational spaces in the city. So that means that even when more people are coming to the city, we try to make the city more livable at the same time as we are adapting to cloudburst, for instance. And that means that right now we have made a recreational park just in the area where I live, where you can play all year round, but when it rains, this is where we collect the rain, and we use the rain to water the grass or the green areas during the summer. So we have tried to come up with ideas that are not taking space from people, but actually thinking people into the cloudburst plan. And that means a lot to the Copenhageners regarding livability and healthy city life, because I agree with Dagur that when you get to experience also recreational and means that the Copenhageners don't even see that there is a cloudburst plan just underneath or underneath the surface or in their park, they just do it. But it also means that a lot of our apartments and buildings are being saved from water in the basement, and that means also healthy living for the people who live in them, because the worst part is when you see normal, healthy buildings being torn apart by damaged by water and all the things that comes afterwards.
So you hinted at something really important here, and that is the quality of life. And there was a phrase Victoria used in her presentation, intangible metrics, which is where I want to bring in Xavier. Trees. Tell us about the work that you're doing with trees and why it's so special.
So we are Coeur and Canopée, Heart and Canopée. It's a French company, so we create microforests into urban areas. And it's a biomimicry approach where we take inspiration from local old forests to find the composition of what we're going to plant back. And we plant this forest in a participatory way. And so we say we bring two values, the microforest itself, which becomes an island of freshness and biodiversity in town, and also the experience of planting, where we have a pathway to get people interested into the planting. At the first workshop, we propose free food, because that's what can make people come. And if I do my job well, then they come for the second workshop, even if there is no food. And if I do my job well again, then they come planting, even if it's pouring cats and dogs. And once they have planted, they want to get involved in the maintenance. And in these two values, so there is a very practical thing of planting trees, and there is this intangible part, which is the enthusiasm, and which comes from the understanding that there is purpose in doing what we do the way we do. And for us at Coeur and Canopée, this is the biggest value we bring to people. We want them to get in touch with the living, understanding that if they are touched by holding a little oak, which is 20 centimeters big, which can become a 40-meter high tree, well, there is a special experience in taking care of this, and that's what we want them to experience. Going back to the measurements, like we are often asked to know, like, how much carbon do you store in your forest? And we tell people, well, we store carbon in an amazing way, but it's very tiny. So we'd like you to consider like bringing more values, like draining the water, like regenerating the soil. And then people come back and say, okay, so how can I measure the fact that I take good care of the water? And a large company came to us and asked us, like, how can we put sensors? And we tell them, well, you don't need sensors. You need sensors to prove on the paper you're doing right. But if the living is coming back to your area in the similar composition as in nature, then it means that all your parameters are green. And so you don't have to go check point by point. You just need to make sure the life is coming back in a robust way.
And you know, there is a very interesting discussion around why historically a lot of our environmental efforts have been focused on reducing carbon because it is measurable, when actually carbon is this very incredibly, carbon concentrations to the ordinary person, you can't see it, you can't touch it, it doesn't mean anything. And what you're talking about is actually something that is much more connective and emotional, and which is interesting because your background is an engineer.
Yeah, and I think like, I like a lot the engineering. I think the biggest stuff I've learned is the 80-20 law, which means even if you don't make the whole effort, you can have a very significant impact. And that's what we do in our forest. We just bring little things back, but there's a lot coming back in terms of ecosystemic services. But it's been also a journey to go from, okay, technology can make a lot of good, to what we need is something about the living, about our relationship to the living, to the non-human living, and also in between us. And that is the thing we need the most, I think.
So, we've had if we think about the kind of triangle of change, governance and politics, people and activism, business. You're also an engineer, or work for an engineering company. You're the guys that actually have to make this adaptation work. You're the guys that are building new stuff, retrofitting old stuff. What does adaptation mean for VINCI?
Yes, huge question. So indeed, so we cannot work alone. But the way we are trying to address this challenge is indeed by being proactive. And a large company like ourselves is lucky because we have two key areas of expertise or of activity, which are to build, yes, so we're building infrastructure, but we also operate. So meaning that climate change is already active and impacting us in a negative way on our motorways, airports, and other mobility infrastructures. So for ourselves, we have to definitely make sure that we know how to monetize the risk, but also adapt and prevent the damages to happen, or at least be ready when an extreme weather event is happening to get back to the normal case as soon as possible. So that's one thing that we can experiment with our own infrastructure, I would say many things. But bad news is that when we are in the built environment, where our role is to be a contractor, we are following our clients. And so far, there are only a limited number of clients, public-private, altogether, who are actively asking us to be precise on the way to address future climate change events. So we are definitely lacking of an economic model here. So putting effort, in terms of prevention instead of repairing, that's something that is not natural, and we need to work on that. So the way we're trying to do is really to say, well, for ourselves, it's some skill set that we already have. So like putting gravels and sand together to build road or buildings, well, we can do that to build gardens. So we need to add the water flow. Well, that's something that we do when we build sewage and water pipes, etc. And then biodiversity and nature is something also on the top, but we also have skill sets. So how to put this expertise that we have as an engineering company indeed together to build some new solutions and to be proactive in the way to present them to a client. And to say, so it's for instance Revilo, Rêve-Îlot, it's a French name but a dream of a freshness island for cities. And by doing that, so it's definitely sitting between cities like you guys, but also solutions like Coeur and Canopée, to put together in the same project, in fact, the multiple benefits of environment. Because one burden that we have is that sometimes we try to think with disconnected brains on the different topic, and mitigating climate change and specifically adaptation to climate change risks means that we need to put together water, soil, nature-based solutions, so to really have carbon sinks in the soils and nature, biodiversity as well. And for sure, on the top, you have also social and economic benefits and advantages.
And you're a large organization. How some organizations of your nature have done, for example, really clever things with governance, put nature on the board. Nature is a board member. How do you take your own internal responsibilities?
So we did it. So our huge conviction is to say that environment and sustainability has to be part of every single thing we do. So I'm the head of environment for VINCI. I'm sitting at the executive committee level, meaning that I represent that. But then at the operational level, the leader of operation, the managers, has to bring together social, economic, environment with the different areas. Meaning that an adaptation, that's not an easy one, because we can see the risk approach. We can imagine some opportunities, but as I was describing to you, it's limited in terms of number of cases of clients actually asking us to build something or to spend money for adapting the current or future infrastructures and cities.
Right.
So meaning that we need to put a lot of learning into the loop, and we developed a tool, for instance, which is how to visualize the effect of climate change for our own employees, but also to be able to use it in front of the clients. To say, by being proactive...
You're trying to push both your internal discussion and suggest to clients, have you thought about it this way? Exactly. Have you thought about it that way?
So it's one by one to say, well, we need to change. So our role is to, well, okay, if a client does not want to consider environment and climate change, etc., maybe just because he's not aware, not only of the problem, but also of the solutions. So we said, okay, let's put it in our hands to raise the level of awareness of our clients and people working in this ecosystem environment, but also bring some tangible solutions, because part
people
of
want
the solutions,
answers.
definitely at least 80% of the solutions are already existing and in our hands.
Dagur.
Yeah, if I can maybe address a need for a new economic model here.
Yeah, and the role of government in providing, making that happen, right?
Because, I mean, in the discussion about climate change, we often have kind of concepts and thoughts that people see as very abstract and kind of far away. But when it comes to adaptation, it's very real. And it's such a clear example of if you don't do anything, there will be immense cost. What's interesting about this cost is that it's to a huge extent on individuals or individual companies, private parties, but the solutions need to be on a city scale or kind of a regional scale, and it's very often very capital intensive. So how can we do this? I think that we need kind of also to adapt the politics of investment and put cities in more focus when it comes to channeling funds. In the recent years, we've seen national governments going from very much focus on climate change to COVID and Ukraine, and these crises are big and very important, but cities are sitting there with a lot of responsibility. They are dealing with the floods after they happen, but we need kind of city activism, and we need direct fundings, international banks or instruments to channel funding straight to cities to deal with this. And national governments have to understand it.
And so take obviously, there are global frameworks for biodiversity and carbon. There are national and supranational in terms of EU guidance. But let's take Iceland nationally. To what extent are you, is the government of the local government of Reykjavik empowered to mandate when it comes to construction projects? You want to see X, Y, and Z. And how much more power do you need to be able to insist that these things happen?
When it comes to regulations, we can kind of lobby for them. And when we prepared for earthquakes that we need to do in Iceland, we were quite successful decades ago to put into regulations how we kind of build houses to be prepared. So we need regulations, but we also need just hard cash to change the infrastructure, to rethink a lot of things. And there, cities are alone. In Iceland, in Denmark, all over Europe, mayors are discussing the need that the European Union channels direct funds to cities. We are discussing on a global scale kind of international financial institutions that focus more on cities. And what private partners need to realize, and companies, is that if cities are not empowered and able to do this, the cost will end up in single homes, at kind of the balance sheet of companies, because these solutions are local. These are real things that happen in between houses, in citywide, or at a regional scale.
Sophie?
Well, I know that when you look at the area of cities, we only take up 2% of the world. But when you look at the amount of people and the amount of emissions, CO2 emissions that comes from cities, cities are both part of the problem, but we're also part of the solution. And what we have seen in Denmark and in Copenhagen is that water knows no boundaries. And often we have to work together with lots of municipalities around Copenhagen in order for us to make an impact, or with the government, or with others. But we also need to, when it comes to financial, to work with the local people who own the land, and to work with the people who work with the companies who supports us, for instance, with clean water or energy or stuff like that. And in Copenhagen, we have made what we call the Energy Leap. It's a program where we took in all partners that works with energy within the area of Greater Copenhagen. And together we looked at what kind of possibilities do we have if we are supposed to lower the energy that we use, and if we're supposed to do it more green. And together we managed to save both private and public 10% of all energy in buildings. And that is a way for us, trying to get more financial, work together, so that it's not only the public city that's doing something, but that we're actually doing with private partners as well. We're doing the same now on biodiversity. I took all the people who own half of the land in Copenhagen, invited them into the table, told them we have to do something about biodiversity, we have to build more. I call them pocket forests or pocket parks. And we have to do more to get, more recreational areas for the people and make it more livable. But we cannot do that alone as a city. We have to do it together with the people who are actually part of the situation, also part of the problem, but also part of the solution.
So Dagur mentioned we have to rethink financing.
We do.
Have you seen enough change in access to green finance? Because government can access money in a way that nobody else can.
They can, but sometimes they're also a barrier. for instance, in Copenhagen, if we really need to get into the goal of being a climate neutral city, we need to have carbon storage. And right now, there is no business model for carbon storage in Denmark as such. And I'm glad that you're working on it in Iceland, and I know they do it in Norway and other places. But this is just one issue that we need to actually make into effect. We need to also make it more profitable to actually plant trees and to have people want to do it by themselves, and not only when the city comes with money for it, because then it becomes a very expensive solution.
Xavier, trees trap carbon. How are we going to find ways to audit and value those softer things in a way that they are still currently hard to put in a spreadsheet so that the carbon accountancy machine starts to value it so we can invest in it?
Tough question. And I don't have the answer. I will evade it as...
If anyone's here that does have the answer.
As cleverly as I can. No, but just to... I mean, it's not the... I mean, in my view, so we are small. But in my view, it's not the carbon that will change the thing.
Right.
Just a short example. We had a school playground. Too hot. 2022, the kids cannot go out. I'm put in touch with the directress, and she said to me, well, we can make a microforest. We asked for subvention, and it's refused. So I was like, what? You're refusing me this project, which is obviously needed and can bring... And yes, sorry, we cannot. And I said, okay, I'm going to find some way to make it, and I will invite you to it. And I didn't know how to do that, but a few days later, I meet an entrepreneur who has a pizzeria. And he says, like, I'm about to make something about CSR, and I tell it, I'd like to plant trees. And I said, well, we have a project just there. And just little by little, we went with this pizzeria man, with this public work company, which was very small. We went with a large group around. We went with the city, which said, we cannot give you money. It's okay, you can lend us tools. And so the directress was fantastic, the pizzeria man was amazing, and with all these people, we have managed to finally make this forest like 8 days ago. So this links very much with what Victoria was saying just before. There are things we can do with what we do every day, and we don't have to make something which is like developed on purpose for this. If we just bring what we're good at, we can certainly do it. And we don't have to wait for the subvention. We don't have to wait necessarily for the money. We just need to meet the people who wants to work with us. And when you find these people, go. It's my way to evade the question about carbon.
Isabelle, answers, solutions, ideas. You're at the heart of looking for some of the most innovative solutions. I know you've been wandering around here going, oh, that's a good idea, and that's a good idea. Not wanting to get you to back anyone's particular startup here, but I just want to get some ideas. What's exciting you at the moment in terms of adaptation? What is the stuff that you think might really shift the dial?
That's a very interesting question, because what's exciting is that it's not too late and we can act, definitely. So exactly like Xavier just told, there are enough people motivated about the change and solution available that, okay, just do it. So every day we can
don't wait for perfect.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my big message indeed. Because if we wait for every barrier to be overcome, etc., we will be too late. So action every day, that's really what motivates me. And when I see a lot of energy like here, well, that's great. Now, the real question of not having an economic model on adaptation is still key. And we need to also act on that. So I'd like to join forces, and we have a working group trying to address that by different angles. One is the insurance. Yes, insurance companies have a role to play in helping find the right economic model for preventing again instead of only repairing the damages. And well, I'm happy to still keep the discussion alive with public-private partnerships as well. because this kind of tools and way to address some problematic also problems is really already happening for climate change. We have, so in case of reducing the emissions, we have maintenance contracts that help to maintain first some utilities, but also manage the energy consumptions and now manage carbon emissions as well. So the same way we did that, and for some municipalities, etc., in a term of contract, which means where it's a partnership, we are ready to invest together, but also build and operate. That's the way to think about that. For adaptation, I think we should really open to innovative ideas like that. So not only the technical solutions, but the contractual way to manage also this big issue.
Dagur, is that where I mean, innovation isn't just the science, it's the financing to allow the change to happen. Is that where you see the most exciting potentials?
Yeah, and some of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Because if we use the conventional insurance models, we are paying something, and then a big bill comes along, and everybody has to pay more, kind of in the future. And what we know is that the bill for not doing adaptation in beforehand will be so high.
Yeah.
So we need a model to finance it
so we can pay for it now.
Before it happens. Because let's be real, there is a tendency to just cut out flooding in the kind of long list of very small letters in your insurance if it's a big risk that costs much. So I think that we also have to lean on the insurance we call society and kind of solve this on a grand scale over borders for whole continents and kind of manage this risk at the level where it is, which is global, because it's such a huge investment needed. But I agree. A lot of these technical solutions are there. They're not all perfect, but I mean, life isn't, but it's still good. And cities can be amazing if we ensure that we are also using it to make them beautiful, more livable and healthy.
Sophie, you have the last word. We've got to think globally, but we're looking for inspiration from you.
Yeah, I know. And we've done so many things in Copenhagen, and we'd love to talk about them. So actually we went out, and now we are working together with Sao Paulo and Johannesburg. And Johannesburg, for instance, we just managed to, now we are into participating about making a cloudburst plan for Johannesburg. And I think that microforesting is probably going to take part of it, but I mean,
So you need to take Xavier on your next field trip.
I mean, we're talking about financial barriers here in the rich part of the world.
Yeah.
What we really need to do now is also to take this discussion to the global south,
yeah,
because they are in much more trouble right now than we are. So all of the things that we have discovered the last 20-25 years in Copenhagen and Reykjavik and other places, we need to discuss how can we make that happen and scale it up in other cities right now and help each other do that.
Sophie, Xavier, Dagur and Isabelle, thank you very much indeed for talking us through that. Much appreciated. So, afraid we're coming to the end, but we've got one more brilliant panelist. We've been talking a lot about storytelling and how we connect with people. That was certainly the message that we got from Victoria. It is my great delight to introduce somebody who knows a huge amount about how to connect with people, old and young. And let's remember, if we don't persuade the youth that this is something that we need to take seriously, what is going to happen? Thankfully, it's young people that are generally driving the conversation these days. James Stewart, an amazing broadcaster and podcaster, well known for lots of the work he does with our youngsters.
Hi.
How you doing, James?
Good, how are you?
Well, all right, welcome to the stage.
It's lunchtime, isn't it, everyone?
It is indeed. We've lost the water, I'm afraid. But
that's okay. Can you hear me?
They can hear me.
Oh, that's
the jingle's
better.
gone.
That's better. Oh, there we go.
You're on. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see this many people at a climate change-related event.
Yep.
Coming from London, we don't get this very often, so I'm going to make the most of having a nice group of people.
Well, people are obviously not listening to you, and if they're not excited.
Too much.
Look, so I want to kick us off. With a topic that you explore quite wonderfully in the podcast that you did for the BBC for young kids.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna drop 2 words.
Oh, go on. Did I say the words?
Well, I think you know the words I'm going to say, don't you?
Yeah, I think I might.
Dolphin poo.
Oh, yeah.
Dolphin poo.
My job is basically to talk about climate change on TV and to young people and make it not a scary subject, which, as we all know, is not easy. It's terrifying. It feels like this massive literal cloud coming towards us. And if you're 8 or 7 or you're in school and you're seeing like ice melting every day and you're reading about the ocean being its warmest consecutively as it has been since the start of the year, that's really scary. It's scary for adults and people like me that sort of do this for a job and look at the graphs. But if you're a kid, like climate anxiety and that sort of awareness of the future being quite a terrifying prospect.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I really had because there wasn't that information. There's so much information now, which is great in some respects. It's not great when you're trying to navigate through life. So I thought, why don't we get 8 of the world's leading climate scientists, people that are actually doing stuff? Because I think that's the thing, like, I don't know anything about medical research or cancer research, but I like to think as we're talking here, there's people trying to cure cancer or sort stuff out. It's the same with climate. We just don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
So, we put 8 people together. So I got in touch with Harvard and Cambridge and people in Japan and across the world. And I said, tell us what you're doing. Like, pretend I'm 8 and tell me, make me not scared. And one of the examples we had was dolphin poo.
Yep.
And the team at ZSL, or London Zoo, found that dolphin poo might help rejuvenate coral reefs because it's got a shed ton of nitrogen in it. Which is really good for coral reef regeneration. So what I try and do is find these little examples, solution-based stuff that make the world slightly less scary for our future generation. Because I think, to me, that's the North Star, is how do you make this a normal conversation? And how, as a family, like if you've got kids, how do you facilitate that chat? If your kids go, Mum, Dad, what's happening? Why is it really hot when we go on holiday? How do you explain that in a way that's not terrifying?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I do.
And do you prefer communicating with a younger audience?
I'm really passionate about working with kids because I think, firstly, because they tend to love nature. So it's a converted audience, and if anyone's got kids, there's some here, they'll hopefully know that. Hi, she's exactly who we want to talk to. And they love it. And so I'm really passionate about it, but so often I get like messages on Instagram and on social media with parents saying, my kids are really scared about the future, and that's horrible. And so I think it's about, for me, turning that fear into like a sense of empowerment. Actually, you've got a once-in-a-generation probably opportunity, because we messed up, to go and do something really exciting. So rather than looking upon it as a scary thing, actually go and do something amazing. It's a chance to go and change this narrative. And I'm really passionate about making sure children particularly have the toolkit to do that, because I didn't at all. Like, we talked about the ozone layer when I was at school, which is now fine, but that was like the big thing.
And so how do you tread that careful line between storytelling and encouraging people to take some form of action?
Yeah, it's tricky. You don't want to. I got criticised by a newspaper this week for being too positive, if you can believe. That's London for you. But there is that. You're right, because if you are too positive, then suddenly when you do hear bad news, it has the opposite effect, where it becomes really bad news. So I think it's about using science for that. Like by trade, I'm a climate scientist, although I haven't been in a lab for a while, but I sort of keep an eye on what's going on. And I think if you can lean into the science behind stuff, i.e. nitrogen and dolphin poo, if you can go, look, dolphin poo, oh, by the way, nitrogen, suddenly people are interested. And I think so much, kids sort of 3, 4, they're doing stuff in nature probably anyway. They like getting their hands dirty. They like drawing pictures of trees. And that's a really great way to connect. The tricky age is sort of 6, 7 to about 11, 12, when they're learning about this stuff at school, and then they come home with questions. And I think that's where the balance between the stories rooted in science, that we spent a lot of time with the team at Cambridge, who I'm not clever enough for that. They have an entire team called the Climate Repair Team, who are literally, there's like 17 of the world's cleverest people in an office trying to repair the climate. And I think people should know about that sort of stuff. So that's what I do.
And then there's another challenge as well, isn't there, of telling stories that are relatable.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to have had the opportunity to travel, to visit the mountains, to do, through adventure, to connect with some of these spaces that for a lot of people, it's not even that they're not aspirational, they're otherworldly. Glaciers, rainforests, the ocean.
Yeah.
How do we tell stories that might activate someone who doesn't have the opportunity to get out to the countryside?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, there's some good examples in the panel you just spoke about here, and I think there's beauty to be had in cities as well. Like, I grew up in a city, I still live in a city, and it's really hard to go, if I drop a piece of litter in Paris, how does it get to the ocean? Like, what's the connect? So I think in those examples, you lean on real life stuff. So to borrow the tree example from our colleagues, who, by the way, everyone here is a mayor, and I feel like apologetic that I'm not the mayor of anything.
Yet.
Yeah, by the end of this talk. So, for example, we took the concept of, okay, there's trees, but what if you live in Paris and there's not enough room physically to plant trees? You build a liquid tree. So you find stories like that. So we met this amazing team from Serbia who literally built a liquid tree, and the concept was it's basically microalgae, which does the same things the tree does. It sucks carbon out. It looks like something out of Star Wars. It's like this green, oozy thing. And so I think it's about finding relatable stories in an urban environment as well, because like you said, we all want to go to the Arctic and see how they're refreezing ice, but that's not particularly practical, nor environmentally friendly, ironically. So that's a great way. And just I always say this to like parents, just do stuff. You can be environmental. You can have no garden, build a little flower box or a window box, and then nature comes to it, and you go, and then kids go, why is there a bee? And suddenly you've got this like narrative journey that connects all of those parts together. So that, I think that's the way to do that.
And I mean, it's clear that when people get their storytelling right, it really can have an impact. And if we wind back, say, for example, the plastics discussion in the UK, it's been so vibrant. But at the end of that journey, you have the government introducing an unbelievably small charge, 5 pence. 5 pence is all it took to stop people from using plastic bags.
It's the same with you remember the straws, the sort of war on straws and the turtles. That
Suffocated turtle. My daughter wrote a song about it.
Did she really?
Yeah. I won't sing it.
Wait till later. No, you're right. I think, and I joked about the ozone layer before, because that was like the thing that when I was growing up, we all talked about, and climate, oh my God, the ozone layer's growing. And then everyone came together and we shrunk it. So it does, you're right, things can happen if you put it in the right direction, but it so rarely happens, and that's the problem. I think I think perhaps working in the media, we have a responsibility for this as well, because it's an overwhelmingly negatively documented subject. The lady before showed some slides of what happens if you Google climate change in heritage sites. It's just awful. And so I think we have a responsibility, I think, to change that narrative a little bit, and I think, as I said, my North Star is how do you make people talk about this subject? You make it not terrifying. And don't get me wrong, that we're not in the position we want to be in climatically. But if you keep telling people that, they're way less likely to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think
you've got to have hope.
You've got to have hope. And like I said, I got 8 of the world's leading climate scientists together. Sadly, they couldn't be here. But they all, every single one of them, I promise you, said they were hopeful. And overwhelmingly, that was because of youth and the future. And as I said at the start of this, that shouldn't feel scary. It will at the moment, but if we give kids the empowerment to be okay with that and take on that mantle, and that's not just go and be a scientist, because social media is a job now. Marketing, you've got to have people to tell these stories, as you said. So it's not like we need more people in STEM. We do, but there's also other parts you can do. Pick subjects that lean into this, and I think that's really exciting.
So what fills you with hope?
I think, I literally just walked off the train like half an hour ago, and I walked in here and was like, oh my God, there's loads of climate people. I want to go and talk to all of them. That's hopeful to me.
That would be a very long conversation.
I'd be here. That's why I was late. But that's really exciting, and I know that it probably sounds really stupid, but as I said, this doesn't happen very often, and getting this many people... Like, imagine if everyone that didn't know anything about climate knew that we were all sitting here talking about climate, and you heard from people like mayors actually spending taxpayer money on stuff. That, to me, gives me hope. But I think more than anything, young people, I'm so passionate about giving them the tools that they need to kind of go forth and and take on this mantle that we sort of messed up for them. And I think we have a responsibility as media, as scientists, as communicators, to give them those tools. And if that's listening to a podcast about dolphin poo, that is fine by me.
So look, I want to dig into a storytelling challenge that we now face.
Oh, yeah.
So for historic reasons, we focused on carbon rather than biodiversity. We're seeing habitat loss and biodiversity become something that the wider movement is realizing. Actually, if we'd always campaigned on nature, then perhaps we wouldn't have been here. Because how do we do that now? What needs to change for us to really turbocharge the storytelling about biodiversity?
Biodiversity specifically?
Yeah.
I think it's like we said before, if you have an overwhelm, I switch off when I love Planet Earth, and David Attenborough is a personal hero of mine, but sometimes at the end of it, I'm like, oh God, I want to switch this bit off because it's really depressing. And I say that, as I said, that's someone that does this for a living. So I think so much of any conversation about changing stuff, you need to have examples of what's being done, the positive stuff. And like I said, there are colleagues that would say that's not the right approach to science. Is exactly, for me, the right approach, because if I'm sat there of a night worrying about the future, and I want to know what people are doing, and I want to know why and how, and I want the science to inform that. So I think when it comes to biodiversity, that's such a big part of it. Like, yeah, okay, you can plant some trees, but so often that's a really nice governmental response to something. Sorry to the mayors, but you've got to maintain the trees, and then there's all these other problems. So I think you've got to have realistic solutions to problems. And biodiversity, I think, is so at the core of that. We love animals, lean into that, and yeah.
And to kind of perhaps go the other way, it's curious, ozone was what? Ozone, which is, I mean, what the hell is ozone?
Oh,
right?
is it? How long have we got?
But it's something that it was relatable, it worked.
Yeah.
That's the thing that turned you on to all of this.
Well, what turned me on to all of this is I used to do a lot of entertainment, like presenting on TV in the UK and the US and stuff, and it became quite vacuous, and I was like asking people what they wore on the red carpets, and there wasn't really anyone my age having this conversation. There was, like, Greta was yet to come along, and as I said, there was David Attenborough, but there wasn't really, like, TikTok wasn't a thing, but now we've got so many resources, and if you're careful about the resources you lean into, I'm not saying TikTok's the be-all and end-all, but places like that, and now there are so many great examples of people sharing stories and talking about, there's a room full of climate solutions below us, and that's awesome. So I think, the ozone thing is what got me switched onto it, but what keeps me engaged is I have a couple of kids' TV shows, and we have kids that come in and they're part of a live audience, and just seeing like how passionate they are about this stuff makes me kind of go, okay, I've got to do my bit, and my bit is I know a bit about science. I'll try and communicate that in a way that's a bit more relatable. Yeah. And that's what I try and do, probably awfully today.
So, from ozone to dolphin poo, what's next?
What's next for me?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. We've got, I'm doing a documentary at the moment with the National Grid. Really exciting. It's mostly me wearing a hard hat.
Right.
But that's interesting because I can't speak for the French energy situation. We share a lot of energy with Europe. And Brexit obviously slightly messed that up, but that transition to net zero from a UK perspective, energy for us is such an important part of that, purely because of where we are. I mean, we're an island, so why aren't we doing more stuff like that? So I think that's what I'm focusing on. We got to go to a mountain called an electric mountain, and inside is a power station, and it powers parts of Wales. We went to an offshore, I don't know if you know this, but when World War II happened, there were loads of unexploded bombs all around the UK, which meant they couldn't build wind turbines. So they're now exploding the bombs so we can have more offshore wind. Stuff like that. I think that transition to net zero from an energy perspective is probably our next big challenge. But speaking to the National Grid guys, from a UK perspective, it seems very obtainable. And again, that's hopeful. That makes me quite excited, as you can tell.
Hope and excitement. James, thank you very much indeed for talking to us and sharing your journey. That is the conclusion of our session on adaptation. We were led off by the brilliant Victoria. I'm glad to see our panelists are still here. I learned an awful lot about what the next challenges are, and the discussion around innovation in finance is really where this is at. So thank you to our panel. Thank you again to James for his insights on dolphin poo, and lots more. I hope you continue to enjoy your conference. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.